A billionaire hid and witnessed his fiancée's hatred for his twins. But the housekeeper, you useless creature. I explicitly told you I didn't want to see those disgusting brats in my kitchen while I'm having breakfast. Vivienne's shriek shattered the mansion's silence as if glass had exploded on the floor. Alexander froze. His hand, holding a bouquet of imported crimson roses, stopped inches from the doorframe. He had returned from his business trip 3 days earlier than planned. He wanted to surprise his fiancée. He wanted to hug his children. But what his eyes saw from the dimly lit hallway was not the familiar scene he had dreamed of during the flight home. It was a nightmare. In the center of the immaculate marble kitchen, under the cold morning light, Rosie, the housekeeper, barely 20 years old, trembled. She wore her pristine blue uniform and those yellow rubber gloves she always used for cleaning, but now she wasn't holding a sponge. Her arms served as a shield. She held the 8-month-old twins, Liam and Matthew, tightly against her chest. The babies cried, a muffled sob, out of pure terror, burying their tiny faces in the young woman's neck. Vivienne, the woman Alexander planned to marry in 2 months, stood before them. She wore the emerald green dress he liked so much, but her face was that of a stranger. Elegance had vanished, replaced by a sneer of disgust and unbridled fury. Miss Beaumont, please, lower your voice, Rosie pleaded, her voice breaking, stepping back until she hit the counter. The children are scared. I just came for warm water for their bottles. I didn't know you were here. Don't answer me, you stupid papa. Vivienne took a menacing step forward, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at her. This is my house, and I can't stand the noise of those creatures. Don't you understand they give me a migraine when they cry? They're as insufferable as you are. Alexander felt a punch to his stomach. His house. Vivienne always claimed to cameras and friends that she loved the twins as if they were her own. She said they were little angels, sent by God after the tragic death of Alexander's first wife. But there, without cameras, without an audience, the mask had fallen. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Rosie sobbed, trying to rock both babies simultaneously. A titanic task. We're going to the staff quarters now. We won't come out until you're finished, I promise. Of course you're going, but first, clean that. Vivienne pointed to a small, imperceptible water stain on the floor. I can't let them go now, Miss Beaumont. They're too distressed. If I let them go, they'll cry louder, Rosie said, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't give a damn if they cry or if they drown, Vivienne screamed, and with a sudden movement, she grabbed a hot coffee mug from the table and threw it to the floor near Rosie's feet. The porcelain shattered, and the dark liquid splattered the housekeeper's shoes and the baby's legs. The twins' cries turned into wails. Alexander had to bite his lip until he tasted the metallic tang of blood to keep from bursting in at that moment. His fists clenched with such force that the rose stems snapped in his hands. He needed to see how far this woman's malice went. He needed to know whom he had brought into his home. Subscribe now to the channel if you want to know how Alexander will make Vivienne pay for every tear of his children. Like if you believe Rosie deserves justice. Rosie didn't move to save herself. She didn't even look at her stained shoes. Her first instinct was to spin sharply, so that not a single shard of porcelain reached the children. You're mad, Rosie cried, forgetting the hierarchy for a second. You could have burned them. They are Mr. Harrington's children. The mention of his name made Vivienne let out a cold, hollow laugh, devoid of any human emotion. Mr. Harrington isn't here, Vivienne bellowed, stepping dangerously close to the girl. That idiot is closing deals in London to pay my credit cards. He doesn't see what happens here. He believes what I tell him to believe. And you're just a disposable servant. If I tell him you broke the mug and harmed the children, who do you think he'll believe? His future high society wife, or a maid who barely finished primary school? Alexander's heart pounded so hard he feared the sound would betray him. That idiot thought the woman he had entrusted with his accounts, his home, and most importantly, his children, saw him simply as a walking ATM. Everything had been a lie. Every I love you, every family photo on Instagram, every farewell kiss, it was all an Oscar-worthy performance. Please, let us go, Rosie begged, hugging the children so tightly that her knuckles under the yellow gloves turned white. I won't tell Mr. Harrington anything, just let us go. Vivienne smiled, and it was the cruelest smile Alexander had ever seen. Oh, darling, you're not going anywhere yet. Vivienne walked to the fridge and pulled out a carton of cold milk. You said you came for milk for the bastards, didn't you? They're your children. Don't call them that, Rosie whispered. They're the children of a dead woman and a man who's never around. They're genetic mistakes that get in my way, Vivienne spat with contempt. You want milk? Have your milk. Without warning, Vivienne uncapped the carton and began pouring cold milk over Rosie's head. The white liquid soaked her hair, her blue uniform, and dripped onto the baby's blankets. The cold made the children scream even louder. Rosie closed her eyes and endured it. She didn't move. She didn't let go of the children. She accepted the humiliation. She accepted the cold and the contempt, turning her own body into a human umbrella so the milk wouldn't touch the skin of little Liam and Matthew. Alexander felt a solitary tear roll down his cheek. It wasn't from sadness. It was from pure, volcanic rage, but also for the first time in months, he saw the truth. While his silk-clad fiancée acted like a monster, the girl in the cheap uniform and rubber gloves acted with the dignity of a queen. Now, Vivienne said, tossing the empty carton to the floor, kneel down and clean all of this with your tongue if necessary. And if I hear one more sound from those babies, I swear on my life I'll have you and your entire family deported before sunset. The order hung in the heavy kitchen air. Kneel. The word resonated in Alexander's mind, who remained hidden behind the dividing wall, trembling with a contained fury that threatened to explode. He saw Rosie's profile, soaked in milk, hair plastered to her forehead, eyes red, but maintaining a firm posture despite the fear. Rosie looked at the floor, then at Vivienne, and finally down at the twins sobbing in her arms. No, Rosie said. Her voice was low but firm. Vivienne blinked as if she hadn't processed the refusal. What did you say? I said no, Rosie repeated, looking up. Her dark eyes shone with new determination. I can clean the floor, ma'am. I can do the laundry, cook, endure your insults, and have food thrown at me. I need this job. God knows I need it to help my sick mother. But I will not kneel before you while holding Mr. Harrington's children. I will not put them on the floor full of glass and cold milk just to satisfy your ego. The silence that followed was terrifying. Alexander held his breath. He was witnessing a bravery he wasn't sure he would possess in that situation. Rosie, a 20-year-old girl, without power or money, was confronting the lady of the house to protect children who were not her own. Vivienne's face transformed. Red color rose from her neck to her cheeks. You dare defy me in my own house? Vivienne hissed, slowly approaching. You're an employee. You're nothing. I'm the future lady of this house. When I marry Alexander, the first thing I'll do is throw you out onto the street like the trash you are, and these children. Vivienne looked at the twins with a blood-chilling coldness. These children, I'll send them to the furthest boarding school I can find in Switzerland. I don't intend to spend my best years looking after other people's brats. Mr. Harrington would never allow that, Rosie replied, clutching the babies. He adores them. Alexander will do whatever I say, Vivienne laughed arrogantly. He's obsessed with me. A few fake tears, a sexy dress, and he'll sign the boarding school papers, believing it's best for their education. He's a weak man, easily manipulated. Each word was a dagger to Alexander. He felt stupid, blind. He had been about to entrust his children's lives to this woman. He remembered all the times Vivienne had suggested more quality time for us two, or perhaps the children would be better off with professionals. Now he understood the true meaning of those suggestions. She wasn't seeking their well-being. She was seeking to get rid of them. Vivienne, furious at the employee's lack of submission, looked for something else to hurt. Her gaze fell on one of the baby's hands. Little Matthew tightly clutched an old, dented, worn silver rattle. It was the only keepsake they had of their biological mother. Alexander had given it to Matthew that very morning before leaving, as a good luck charm. Give me that, Vivienne ordered, extending her hand. What? Rosie asked, confused, stepping back further. That old noisy rubbish the child has. Give it to me, Vivienne screamed, lunging forward. No. Rosie turned her body, protecting the baby with her shoulder. It's from their mother. Mr. Harrington said we should never take it from him. That woman is dead, and that rattle is hideous. It doesn't match my decor. Vivienne violently grabbed Rosie's arm, digging her nails into her skin through the uniform fabric. There was a struggle. It was brief, but intense. Rosie, despite being smaller, had the strength of someone defending what they loved. She didn't let go of the children, and didn't let Vivienne reach the rattle. Let go of me, Rosie cried, lightly pushing Vivienne with her elbow to free herself. Vivienne stumbled backward, losing her balance on her high heels, and had to grab the table to keep from falling. The indignation on her face was absolute. You touched me! Vivienne shrieked, her eyes wide. You assaulted me. This is physical assault. I'm calling the police right now. You're going to prison, you savage. You attacked me first. I was only protecting Matthew." Rosie was openly weeping now. The terror of prison mingled with the anguish of losing the children. "No one will believe you." Vivienne pulled her phone from her pocket. Her fingers trembled with rage as she dialed. "I'm calling security to drag you out, and then the police. And when they arrive, I'll say you tried to rob me, and that you mistreated the children. I have the marks on my arm where you pushed me. It's my word against yours." Rosie fell to her knees, but not to clean. She fell, overcome by the weight of injustice. She hugged the two babies on the floor, sobbing onto their little heads. "Please, Miss Beaumont, don't do that. Don't separate me from them," Rosie pleaded. Vivienne smiled triumphantly, phone to her ear. "Too late. Say goodbye to your life, servant." It was at that precise moment, just before Vivienne could press the call button, that a deep, grave voice, laden with lethal authority, emerged from the shadows of the hallway. "There's no need to call anyone, Vivienne." Time stopped. Vivienne froze, color instantly drained from her face. The phone slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Alexander emerged from his hiding place. He no longer held the roses. He had let them fall to the floor, trampled, just like his love for her. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, but his gaze was so intense it seemed capable of setting the air ablaze. He didn't look at Rosie. His eyes were fixed on the woman who 5 minutes earlier was going to be his wife. "Ah, Alexander," Vivienne stammered, her voice trembling, trying to compose a nervous smile. "Darling, what a surprise. No, I wasn't expecting you until Friday." Alexander stopped 2 meters from her. He ignored her greeting. He ignored her attempt to approach him. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I know, and thank God I came back early, because if I had been 1 day later..." Alexander left the sentence hanging in the air, laden with threat. Then he looked down at Rosie, who was still on the floor, trembling, covering his children. He saw her soaked in milk, her arms marked, surrounded by broken glass. Vivienne, recovering her manipulative instinct, launched herself at him, feigning tears. "Alexander, darling, thank God you're here. That woman went mad. She attacked me, tried to rob me, and when I caught her, she threw milk at the children. You have to fire her. She's dangerous." Alexander raised a hand, ordering her silent without touching her. Then he did something Vivienne didn't expect. He walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture. He knelt in front of the housekeeper and with infinite tenderness placed a hand on Rosie's shoulder. "Rosie," he said softly, "please, get up." "Sir, I didn't." Rosie could barely speak. "I know," Alexander interrupted her, and then slowly turned to Vivienne. His eyes were pure ice. "I heard everything. Vivienne, every word." Vivienne recoiled, hitting the kitchen island. The game was over, but the war had just begun. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than the marble of the countertop. Alexander kept his gaze fixed on Vivienne, a gaze that did not blink, a gaze that stripped the soul bare. Vivienne, cornered against the kitchen island, attempted one last desperate tactic. Her face changed in a fraction of a second, shifting from terror to a mask of offended indignation. She smoothed her green dress, swept her hair back, and lifted her chin, recovering that high-class arrogance that used to intimidate everyone, except now, in front of Alexander, it seemed ridiculous. "Every word?" Vivienne repeated, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Please, Alexander, don't be so dramatic. You're taking things out of context. I was disciplining her." She pointed at Rosie, who remained on the floor, trembling under Alexander's protective hand. "This girl is a savage, darling. She has no manners." She almost dropped Liam. "I had to be firm so she would understand that you don't mess with your children's safety. I did it for you. Everything I do is for you." Alexander did not respond to Vivienne. Instead, he looked down at Rosie. The young employee had her eyes closed, expecting a shout, a blow, or dismissal. The cold milk still dripped from her hair, soaking the shoulder of her uniform and mixing with the tears that fell onto the baby's blankets. The twins, sensing the tension, had stopped crying, but sobbed silently, clinging to Rosie's neck, as if she were their only lifeline in a shipwreck. "Rosie," Alexander said again, his soft voice brutally contrasting with the violence of the environment. "Give me Matthew." Rosie opened her eyes, startled. "Sir, they're dirty. They have milk. I'll stain your suit." "I don't care about the suit," he cut in firmly, but without anger towards her. "Give him to me." With trembling hands, Rosie passed him one of the babies. Alexander took his son in his arms. The child, feeling his father's strong embrace, buried his face in his chest. Alexander felt the dampness of the milk on his Italian silk shirt. He felt the cold that had penetrated the baby's clothes. He closed his eyes for a second, fighting the urge to destroy everything in the room. His son was freezing. He quickly removed his suit jacket and placed it over Rosie's shoulders, also covering the other baby, Liam, who was still in the young woman's arms. "Cover yourself," he ordered. "You're trembling." Vivienne let out a gasp when she saw him. Her eyes widened. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, taking a step forward, forgetting her role as a victim. "That jacket is an Armani. It's worth more than that common maid's life. You're gonna put it on her?" "She's dirty, Alexander. She smells of sour milk and poverty." Alexander turned slowly. He held his son in one arm and with the other hand helped Rosie to her feet. The image was powerful. The billionaire, the humble employee, and the children, forming a circle of protection from which Vivienne was excluded. "Be quiet," Alexander said. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, damning sentence. "I won't be quiet," Vivienne burst out, losing her temper. "I've been enduring this for months, pretending to care about these brats to please you. And now you arrive and treat me like a criminal for bringing order to my own house. Your house." Alexander took a step towards her, making Vivienne recoil until she hit the fridge again. "You said they were genetic mistakes. You said they were in the way." Vivienne turned red. The veins in her neck bulged. She could no longer maintain the lie, so she decided to use the truth as a weapon. "And they are," she cried, spitting the words with venom. "Look at them. They're a burden, Alexander. We're young, we're rich, we have the world at our feet. We could be traveling, enjoying life, but no, we always have to worry about whether the children are crying, whether they're hungry, whether the servant is useless. They ruin everything. They ruin our intimacy. They are my children," Alexander said, with a chilling coldness. "They are times children." Vivienne pointed into the air, referring to the deceased wife. "She's dead, Alexander. Get over it. I'm alive. I'm the woman in your bed. And you know what? Yes, I hate them. I hate that they look like her. I hate that they take your attention away from me. And I hate having to pretend to be the perfect mother for your social media. I'm fed up." Rosie, wrapped in Alexander's enormous jacket, took a step back, horrified by the confession. She covered baby Liam's ears so he wouldn't hear the hatred in that woman's voice. "Thank you," Alexander said. Vivienne blinked, confused by the response. "What?" "Thank you for taking off your mask before I signed the marriage certificate." Alexander stroked Matthew's head. "Thank you for showing me that the only mistake here was me, for choosing you." Vivienne felt the blow, the fear of losing her status, her unlimited credit card, the parties, the family name, hit harder than any slap. She tried to compose herself, soften her tone, try to manipulate again. "Alexander, my love, I'm stressed. The wedding, the preparations. I said things I didn't mean. You know I love them. It's just that this girl provokes me. She gives me dirty looks. She wants your money. Alexander, look at her. With that innocent face. She plays the victim so you'll save her. She's a gold digger." Alexander looked at Rosie. He saw her shrink, her gaze downcast, ashamed to be the center of the discussion, concerned only with calming the children. Then he looked at the pieces of porcelain on the floor, the spilled milk, the red mark on Rosie's arm where Vivienne had grabbed her. "She stood between you and my children to protect them," Alexander said. "She let herself be humiliated. She let herself be drenched. And she was willing to clean the floor on her knees so you wouldn't hurt them. That's not being a gold digger, Vivienne. That's being a mother. Something you can never be, because you have a barren heart." "Don't compare me to the servant," Vivienne shrieked hysterically. "I am Vivienne Beaumont. I have class. I have a family name." "You have a family name," Alexander corrected. "But you have no class. Class isn't the dress you're wearing, Vivienne. Class is how you treat people who can't defend themselves. And you are the poorest person I have ever met in my life." The air in the kitchen was charged with static electricity. The twins, feeling safe in their father's and Rosie's arms, had almost completely calmed down, reducing their crying to small, occasional whimpers. That sudden silence from the children made Alexander's words resonate with greater brutality. Vivienne breathed heavily, her chest rising and falling violently. The humiliation of being rejected in front of the servants was unbearable for her ego. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms and adopting a defensive, haughty posture. "If you're going to take her side, do it. Stay with your servant and your troublesome children. But I warn you, Alexander, if you cancel the wedding, you'll be the laughingstock of society. The invitations have already been sent. The press is waiting for the event of the year." Are you going to humiliate me publicly? Are you going to cancel everything over a tantrum and a spilled glass of milk? Alexander stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His physical presence was imposing. Vivienne, for the first time, felt real fear. Not fear of losing money, but fear of the man in front of her. A glass of milk? Alexander asked in a dangerous whisper. You think this is about the milk? It's just a stain, she insisted desperately. It cleans up. I heard about the boarding school, he blurted out. Vivienne froze, opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Switzerland, Alexander continued, quoting her words with surgical precision. The furthest I can find. I don't intend to spend my best years looking after other people's brats. That's what you said. It was a way of speaking, Vivienne stammered, backing up until her back hit the cold edge of the sink. It wasn't a plan. Alexander looked at her with disgust. You planned to get rid of my children as soon as you had the ring on your finger and my signature on the bank accounts. You planned to exile 2 8-month-old babies to another continent so you could live the life of luxury you think you deserve without hindrance. Alexander turned to Rosie, who watched the scene with wide eyes, hugging Liam. Rosie, how long has this been going on? He asked. Rosie hesitated. She looked at Vivienne, who shot her a furious glance, a silent warning of, if you speak, I'll kill you. But then Rosie looked at Matthew in his father's arms and Liam in hers. She remembered the hidden pinches, the times Vivienne forgot to feed them when Alexander wasn't home, the screams when they cried. Since you started going on trips, sir, Rosie whispered, her voice trembling but clear. She doesn't touch them, she doesn't hold them, and if they cry, she turns up the music so she can't hear them. She forbade me to tell you anything. She said, if I told you anything, you'd fire me because you love her, and no one would believe me. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, assimilating the guilt. He had left his children in the lion's den. She's lying! Vivienne screamed. She's a liar! She's saying it to save her job. Be quiet, Alexander said without opening his eyes. Then he opened them, and they were devoid of any affection. It's over, Vivienne. What? She asked incredulously. It's all over. The wedding, the relationship, your life in this house. I want you out now. Vivienne let out an incredulous laugh. You can't kick me out. I live here. My things are here. I have rights. We're common law partners in the eyes of the law. You are nothing. Alexander cut her off, his voice rising in volume for the first time. You are a guest who overstayed her welcome. This house is in my name. And I have cameras, Vivienne. Color drained from Vivienne's face so fast it looked like she would faint. Cameras? She whispered. I installed a new interior security system before I left for London. I wanted to be able to see the children from my phone when I missed them, Alexander explained, enjoying the terror in her eyes. I didn't have time to review them on the trip because I was in non-stop meetings. But now I wonder what I'll see if I review the recordings from the last week. How many times you yelled at them? How many times you left them crying? How many times you humiliated Rosie? Vivienne looked towards the corners of the ceiling, searching for hidden lenses. She knew she was lost. If those recordings existed and came to light, she wouldn't just lose Alexander. She'd lose her reputation, her friends, her social status. She would be branded a child abuser. Alexander, her tone changed radically. Now it was pure supplication. Please, you can't do this to me, darling. Let's talk in private. Let's send the maid away and talk like adults. I promise I'll change. I'll go to therapy. It's the stress, I swear. I love Liam and Matthew. I just need help. Don't throw me out like this! Where will I go? Alexander looked at the woman crying crocodile tears in front of him. He felt nothing, no love, no hate, just an immense urgency to remove that toxin from his home. I don't care where you go, he said, but you won't spend another minute under the same roof as my children. He turned towards the kitchen door, where the head of security, alerted by the shouts, had just appeared with a worried look. Jenkins, Alexander called. Yes, sir, the burly man replied, looking at the confused scene. Milk on the floor, the crying fiancée, the boss with a baby. Escort Miss Beaumont out, Alexander ordered, right now. Don't let her go upstairs to the bedroom. She leaves with what she's wearing. What? Vivienne shrieked, clinging to the countertop. My jewelry, my clothes. I have designer dresses up there. You can't steal my things. I'll send your things in boxes to your mother's house tomorrow, Alexander said, turning his back to walk towards Rosie. Except the ring. Alexander stopped and turned one last time. He held out his hand. The ring, Vivienne, give it to me. Vivienne covered her left hand with her right. The 5-carat diamond sparkled under the kitchen light. It was her trophy, her life insurance. "No," she said, her gaze crazed. "It's a gift. It's mine." "It's an engagement," Alexander said, approaching her with a firm step. "An engagement you broke the moment you threw milk, boiling with hatred, at the woman who cares for my children. Give it to me, or I'll have Jenkins call the police and report you for aggravated domestic assault and theft. I have the evidence. You choose. You leave without the ring, but with your freedom. Or you leave in handcuffs." Vivienne looked at Jenkins, who waited with a serious face. She looked at Alexander. She looked at Rosie, who watched her with a mix of fear and pity. With a cry of animal frustration, she ripped the ring from her finger and threw it with all her might. The ring hit Alexander's chest and fell to the floor, rolling to a stop near Rosie's milk-stained shoes. "I hate you!" Vivienne screamed, her face disfigured by rage. "I hope you're miserable with your bastards and your servant. No one will ever love you like I do. Get her out of here, Jenkins," Alexander said, without even bending down to pick up the diamond. His attention was already completely focused on something else. As Vivienne's screams faded down the hallway towards the front door, the kitchen fell into a sudden silence. Alexander let out the breath he hadn't known he was holding. His shoulders slumped. He turned to Rosie. She was still standing, hugging Liam, enveloped in the oversized suit jacket. She was trembling, not from cold, but from the adrenaline rush. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked, approaching her with a tenderness that seemed impossible in the same man who had just executed an emotional sentence. Rosie looked up. Her dark eyes were filled with tears. "Sir, the ring is very expensive. It's there on the floor." Alexander looked at the diamond lying in the puddle of milk. Then he looked at Rosie, at her hands red from work and effort, at her uniform soiled from protecting his family. "Leave it there," Alexander said. "There are far more valuable things in this kitchen than that piece of carbon." Rosie looked at him, not understanding. Alexander approached and carefully wiped a drop of milk from the cheek of the baby she held. "Forgive me, Rosie," he said, looking her in the eyes. "Forgive me for not being here. Forgive me for bringing that monster into our home." Rosie shook her head, sobbing. "You don't have to apologize to me, sir. I just was afraid they would take the children away." "No one is taking them away," Alexander promised. "As long as I live, no one will harm them, and neither will you." At that moment, Alexander saw something that broke his heart. Now that the adrenaline was subsiding, Rosie winced in pain as she adjusted Liam. The jacket slipped a little, revealing her forearm. There, on her pale skin, dark bruises were beginning to form, perfectly shaped like Vivienne's fingers, the marks of loyalty. Alexander felt fury return, but this time it was different. It was a protective fury. "You're hurt," he said, gently touching near the bruise. "It's nothing, sir. Just a squeeze." "It's nothing," he repeated ironically. "You defended yourself like a lioness against a woman who is twice your age and malice." Alexander made a decision at that instant. The hierarchy of that house had just been broken forever. There was no longer master and servant. There was a father and the woman who had saved his children. "Come," he said, gently guiding her out of the soiled kitchen. "Let's go to the drawing room. You need to sit down, We need to talk, but not as boss and employee." Rosie followed him, still stunned, leaving behind the shattered kitchen, the millionaire ring thrown in the rubbish, and the life they had known until 10 minutes ago. Everything had changed. And though Vivienne was gone, the real story had only just begun. The mansion's drawing room was plunged into a deathly silence, an overwhelming contrast to the shouts and chaos of just minutes earlier. Alexander entered, carrying Matthew while gently guiding Rosie, who held Liam in her arms, towards the cream Italian leather sofa. "Sit down," Alexander said, not as an order, but as an urgent request. Rosie hesitated. She looked at her dirty uniform, stained with sticky milk and cold coffee. She looked at the immaculate sofa that cost more than she would earn in 10 years of work. "Sir, I'll dirty the furniture. I'd better go to my room, change quickly, and come back to look after the children." "Sit on the furniture," Alexander grumbled, and with one hand, gently pushed the young woman's back until she sank into the sofa. The twins, exhausted by crying and stress, began to fall asleep against Rosie's chest and Alexander's shoulder. He looked around, feeling like a stranger in his own home. Everything was luxury, modern art, open spaces, and coldness. There was no warmth. Until that moment, he hadn't realized that his home looked more like a museum than a place where children grow up. "Wait here. Don't move," Alexander said. He carefully placed Matthew on the sofa, nestled next to his brother on Rosie's lap, and darted towards the main bathroom. He returned seconds later with a first aid kit and an ice pack wrapped in a soft towel. He knelt in front of Rosie. The great business magnate, the man who made his competitors tremble with a glance, was kneeling on a Persian rug, attending to his housekeeper. "Give me your arm," he asked. Rosie flinched, embarrassed. "Really, sir, it's not necessary. My mum always says I have delicate skin. It bruises easily, but it heals quickly." "Rosie." Alexander looked her in the eyes. There was pain in his gaze, a deep and honest pain. "Please, let me do this. It's the least I can do after not having been here to prevent it." She nodded slowly and extended her left arm. Alexander delicately rolled up the sleeve of her damp uniform. What he saw made his jaw clench until it ached. Vivienne's fingers were marked in a dark violet on the girl's white skin. 5 brutal pressure points. It hadn't been a grip to stop her. It had been a grip to hurt, to dig in her nails. Alexander opened the pot of anti-inflammatory ointment, took some with his fingers, and began to apply it to the bruises. His hands, large and calloused, moved with unexpected tenderness. Rosie held her breath. The touch of his skin against hers sent an electric current that had nothing to do with pain. "Why didn't you call me?" Alexander asked, his gaze fixed on the bruise, not daring to look at her. "I have a private phone. Jenkins gave it to you when we hired you. Why did you endure this in silence?" Rosie lowered her gaze to the sleeping heads of the twins. She said, "You wouldn't believe me." She said that men like you always choose the pretty society woman over the employee. Alexander stopped his hand. The silence thickened. "And you believed her? You believed I was that kind of man?" "I don't know you, sir," Rosie replied with brutal honesty. "You're never here." The words hit Alexander harder than any insult from Vivienne. It was the truth. He was a ghost in that house, a check provider, not a father, not a present human being. "You're right," he whispered. "You're absolutely right." He continued applying the ointment in silence. Then he gently placed the ice on the area. "Was there anything else?" he asked, fearing the answer. "Aside from the shouting and pushing? Did she threaten you with anything else?" "Because I saw the terror in your eyes when she mentioned the police." "It wasn't fear of prison, Rosie. It was another kind of fear." Rosie swallowed. A lump formed in her throat. "My mum, she's very ill. She has advanced diabetes and needs dialysis. The insurance you give me, the medical insurance from this job, covers her treatment." Alexander looked up, surprised. "And Miss Beaumont knew that. She told me that if I opened my mouth, she wouldn't just fire me without a letter of recommendation, but she'd make sure I was blacklisted from agencies. She said she'd use her influence so no one would ever hire me again." A solitary tear escaped Rosie's eye. "Without this job, my mum will die, sir. Literally. We have no savings. We live hand to mouth." Alexander felt a deep nausea. Vivienne had not only physically abused her, she had emotionally kidnapped her. She had used the life of a sick elderly woman as a bargaining chip to torture Rosie and the children. It was calculated cruelty, sociopathic. My God. Alexander ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You endured having hot milk thrown at you, being humiliated, being treated like an animal, just to save your mother and to protect them." Rosie stroked Liam's back. "If I left, who would look after them? She left them in the cart for hours, sir, hours, with dirty nappies. She put the tablet with noisy videos glued to their faces to make them shut up. I couldn't leave them alone with her. I preferred to endure her blows than to leave your defenseless children." Alexander abruptly stood up and walked to the large window overlooking the garden. He needed air. He needed not to break something. He felt like the smallest man in the world. He, with his millions, his private jets, and his companies, had not protected his family. The one who had done it was a 20-year-old girl who earned minimum wage and lived with the fear of losing her mother. The moral debt he owed her was immeasurable. He turned to her. The evening light entered through the window, illuminating Rosie and the children on the sofa. They looked like a Renaissance painting, the Virgin and Child, but dressed in a stained blue uniform. "Rosie," Alexander said with a firm voice, "listen to me closely. From today, your mother's treatment is on me, private, the best specialists. It won't depend on insurance or a job. I will pay for it personally for life." Rosie's eyes widened, shaking her head. "No, sir. I'm not telling you this to ask for money. It's not an offer." He cut her off. "It's the least I can do. You saved my children when I was too busy making money. You were their mother when their biological one was gone, and the one I chose turned out to be a monster. I won't allow you to be afraid for money ever again. Mr. Harrington, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just let me help you now. Alexander returned to the sofa and sat beside her, but maintaining a respectful distance. Let me hold Liam. Your arm is hurt. You shouldn't strain it. Rosie nodded and carefully passed him the sleeping baby. As they transferred him, their hands brushed again. This time, neither of them pulled away immediately. There was a second, a brief, imperceptible second, where the invisible barrier between employer and employee completely dissolved, leaving only a man and a woman united by the love for two defenseless children. They're heavy, Alexander murmured, looking at his son's peaceful face. How do you manage to carry both of them and the weight of this house's secrets? Love doesn't weigh, sir, she replied in a whisper. What weighs is evil, and that has already left through the door. An hour passed, the house darkened, and Alexander turned on the dim lights in the drawing room. The twins began to wake up, and with their awakening came hunger. A synchronized cry broke the fragile calm that had settled in the room. They're hungry, Rosie said, trying to get up quickly, but she winced in pain as she put weight on her injured arm. Stay, Alexander ordered, raising a hand. You're hurt. I'll do it. Sir, with all due respect, Rosie looked at him with doubt. Do you know how to prepare bottles? They have an exact measure of formula, and the water temperature has to be precise. If it's too hot, they'll burn themselves. If it's cold, they'll get colic. Alexander stopped halfway to the kitchen. He froze. Did he know? Of course, he didn't know. He had never prepared a bottle in his life. There had always been someone else to do it, a nurse, Rosie, or Vivienne's false promise that she would take care of it. It's water and powder, isn't it? He asked, feeling ridiculous. Rosie gave a shy smile, the first Alexander had seen from her in months. It was a small smile, but it lit up her tired face. It's a little more complicated than that, sir. Let me guide you. You be my hands. They went to the kitchen. The crime scene. The floor had already been cleaned by the cleaning staff who had silently entered while they were in the drawing room, but the atmosphere still felt heavy. Rosie sat on a high stool at the island, away from where the aggression had occurred, while Alexander rolled up his silk shirt sleeves to his elbows. First, wash your hands. Very good, she instructed. Alexander obeyed. He washed his hands with the seriousness of a surgeon before an open-heart operation. Done. Now take the bottles from the sterilizer. Don't touch the teat with your fingers. Hold them by the plastic ring. Alexander struggled with the sterilizing machine. It seemed like NASA technology to him. When he finally managed to take out 2 bottles, he almost dropped one. Damn it. Sorry, he muttered, looking at the crying children in their nearby high chairs. Relax, sir. They can sense your nerves. Breathe, Rosie said in a calm voice. Now, the water has to be purified water. Heat it for 20 seconds in the microwave. No more than 20 seconds. And test it on your wrist afterwards. It has to feel lukewarm, not hot. The process was a comical and revealing disaster. Alexander spilled formula powder on the black countertop. That's gold dust, sir. It costs a lot, Rosie joked nervously, and he laughed for the first time. He burned his wrist with the first water test. He used the wrong cap. But amidst that domestic chaos, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt when closing multi-million-pound deals in London or New York. He felt useful. He felt like a father. That's good, Rosie approved when he finally achieved the perfect mixture. Now shake them gently, not like a cocktail, sir, or you'll fill their bellies with air, circular movements. Alexander shook the bottles with absolute concentration. Done. Dinner is served, gentlemen, he said, turning to his sons. He handed a bottle to Rosie to feed Liam, and took Matthew. He sat on the stool next to her. At first, Matthew rejected the teat, crying and looking for Rosie. He doesn't want me, Alexander said, with a sharp pain in his chest. He knows I'm a stranger. It's not that, Rosie said softly. It's that you're tense. Your muscles are stiff. Relax. Cradle him in the crook of your arm, close to your heart. Let him hear your heartbeat. That calms them. Alexander took a deep breath. He released the tension in his shoulders. He looked at his son not as an heir, but as a baby who needed love. Hello, Matthew, he whispered. I'm Daddy. Sorry I'm late. The baby calmed down at the grave, soft voice, opened his mouth and accepted the bottle. His tiny hands clung to Alexander's index finger, squeezing it tightly. Alexander felt tears well up in his eyes. He looked beside him. Rosie fed Liam with an innate naturalness and grace. She hummed a lullaby, a sweet and melancholic melody that filled the emptiness of the kitchen. What song is that? Alexander asked softly. My grandmother used to sing it to me, she said. It's about a mother working in the fields to bring things home to her child. Alexander observed the scene. The two babies eating, the soft light of the kitchen, the humble girl humming. He realized that this was the image of family he had been desperately searching for in fashion catalogs and high society parties. And yet, he had it right there, invisible, hidden in the staff quarters. Rosie, he said suddenly. Yes, sir. What did they eat when Vivienne wouldn't let you feed them? The question broke the magic of the moment, bringing back the harsh reality. Rosie stopped humming. I saved food from my lunch, fruit, biscuits. Sometimes I stole. I borrowed milk from the pantry when she was napping. That's why I told you I went for water this morning. She controlled the formula. She said it was too expensive and that they ate too much. Alexander's anger, which had been calmed by the task of the bottles, reignited, but this time it was a cold, calculated anger. She rationed my children's food. She said if they ate too much, they'd get fat, and fat babies didn't look good in Instagram photos, Rosie confessed, bowing her head. She said they had to be aesthetic. Alexander squeezed the bottle so hard that the plastic cracked. Aesthetic, he repeated with disgust. My God, I was about to marry a psychopath. Sir, Rosie hesitated before speaking. Is there anything else? Alexander looked at her, fearing what else there could be. Tell me everything. Don't hide anything else from me. The children's room. You never go in there, do you? No, hardly ever. Vivienne said it was her territory, that she decorated it, and she didn't want me to mess anything up. You should go see Matthew's cot, Rosie said mysteriously. Under the mattress. What's under the mattress? See for yourself when they finish eating. 20 minutes later, with the babies satisfied and gently burping on their shoulders, they went up to the first floor. The children's room was a designer fantasy neutral colors, imported wooden toys that seemed never to have been touched, linen curtains. Everything perfect, everything cold. Alexander put Matthew on the changing table and went to the cot. He lifted the latest generation orthopedic mattress. There, hidden between the bed base and the mattress, was a small electronic device, an old tablet connected to an external battery. What is this? Alexander asked, pulling it out. Turn it on, sir. It's what she put on for them so they wouldn't bother her. Alexander pressed the button. The screen lit up. It wasn't cartoons. It wasn't classical music. It was white noise, pure static at a deafening volume, and a looped recording of a voice, Vivienne's voice. Be quiet! Be quiet! Go to sleep or I'll hit you! Nobody loves you! Be quiet! The recording repeated over and over. Alexander felt his legs give way. He sank onto the rug with the tablet in his hand. She put this on for them to sleep, Rosie said from the doorway, tears in her eyes. She said it was sleep training. She said that way they learned that crying was useless, because no one would come. I took it away whenever I could, but she hid it in different places. Today I found it there. Alexander looked at the device of hell. He looked at his children, who now watched him from Rosie's arms. He understood why Matthew clung to his finger with such desperation. He understood the terror in their eyes when Vivienne entered the kitchen. It wasn't just a bad stepmother, it was systematic psychological torture. And then, the horror transformed into absolute clarity. Alexander stood up. His face no longer showed doubt, nor tiredness, nor even sadness. It only showed resolve. Jenkins, he said, pulling out his phone and dialing the head of security. Prepare the car. Sir, it's late, the voice on the other end replied. Where are we going? To the police station, Alexander said, looking at the tablet. And call all my barristers. I want the full criminal defense team in my office first thing tomorrow morning. Vivienne isn't just leaving this house. She's going to prison. He hung up the phone and looked at Rosie. And you, he said, you're going to pack your things. Rosie felt her world collapse. Are you firing me? She asked in a thin voice. After everything. Alexander approached her and took her hands firmly. No, Rosie, I'm not firing you, but you're not going to keep sleeping in the staff quarters. That room is an undignified shoebox. From tonight, you're staying in the guest bedroom on the top floor, the one next to mine. Sir, that's not right. I'm the employee. You are the only family these children have, Alexander said, and the only person I trust in this damned world. Pack your things. Today, a new life begins for everyone. Can Alexander get Vivienne into prison with this new evidence? Will Rosie accept her new place in the mansion, or will fear of society stop her? Subscribe to see the legal revenge in the next part. Rosie's suitcase was on the bed in the staff quarters. It was an old suitcase with a broken zip and a missing wheel, inherited from an uncle who had tried to cross the border years ago. Inside, her belongings told the story of a life of hardship. 3 worn blue uniforms, 2 changes of street clothes bought at the flea market, a yellowed Bible, and a framed photograph of her mother smiling before diabetes consumed the sparkle in her eyes. Rosie folded her last jumper with one hand, wincing in pain. The ointment Alexander had applied eased the burning, but the bruise on her arm throbbed with every movement, a purple reminder of Vivienne's fury. "Don't take the uniforms," a voice said from the doorway. Rosie jumped in fright. Alexander was there, leaning against the small, damp doorframe. The staff quarters had no windows, just a loudly humming extractor fan. Alexander looked at the peeling walls, the sagging mattress, and the damp ceiling. He felt a deep shame. His dog slept in a heated kennel, while the woman who cared for his children slept in a cell. "Sir, they're my work uniforms," Rosie said, bowing her head. "I need them for tomorrow." "No." Alexander entered the room, filling the small space with his presence. "Tomorrow you won't be cleaning. Tomorrow you won't be cooking. Tomorrow you'll be busy." "Busy?" Rosie looked at him with fear. "Looking for another job." Alexander shook his head. A sad half-smile crossed his face. "Busy being a witness, and busy resting. Throw those uniforms away or burn them. I don't want to see you dressed in blue and yellow ever again. That color is the color of your servitude in this house. And that's over." He took the old suitcase from the bed with surprising ease. "Come on, the children are already asleep upstairs. Jenkins will be standing guard in the hallway all night." The journey from the basement, where the staff quarters were, to the first floor was like crossing an invisible border between 2 worlds. They went up the service staircase, crossed the immaculate kitchen, and ascended the grand marble staircase. Rosie walked a step behind him, feeling as if her mere presence soiled the carpets. Alexander opened a double solid wood door at the end of the hallway, directly opposite the twins' room. "This is your room," he announced. Rosie entered and gasped. The guest bedroom was 3 times larger than her mother's entire house. It had a king-size bed with Egyptian silk sheets, a private balcony overlooking the city, a bathroom with a jacuzzi, and a giant flat-screen television. "Sir, this is too much," she whispered, hugging herself. "I can't sleep here. I'll ruin the sheets. I'm not used to it. I'll fall out of that big bed." Alexander placed the suitcase on the floor and turned to her. His face was serious, but his eyes were warm. "Rosie, listen to me. You slept on the floor to protect my children from broken glass. You put your body as a shield. There is nothing in this house, absolutely nothing, that is too good for you. You have earned this place, not as an employee, but as the guardian of this family." "But what will people say?" she asked, her voice trembling with insecurity. "A servant sleeping on the noble floor? Let them say what they want," Alexander cut in firmly. "The people who matter are safe in the room opposite. Thanks to you. Now rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. My barristers will be here at 8. I need you to tell them everything you saw, everything you heard, without fear. I will be by your side every step of the way." Alexander headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "And Rosie?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." "You already told me, sir. It's not enough," he said. "It never will be." He closed the door softly. Rosie was left alone in the immensity of luxury. She approached the bed timidly and touched the duvet. It was soft as a cloud. She sat on the edge, not daring to get in yet. She took her mother's photo from the suitcase and placed it on the mahogany bedside table. "Mum," she whispered into the air, "I think God sent us an angel. Or maybe he just sent us a man who finally opened his eyes." Meanwhile, in his downstairs study, Alexander did not sleep. He sat in front of 3 high-resolution monitors. Beside him, an open but untouched bottle of whiskey. On the central screen, the kitchen security video played over and over again. The exact moment Vivienne threw the milk, the moment she grabbed Rosie's arm, the moment she confessed her hatred for the bastards. Alexander watched the images with clinical coldness. There was no pain in his chest, only strategy. He was building the case. He had sent the files to his head of security and his principal barrister, the feared Mr. Finch, known in the city as the Shark. His phone vibrated on the desk. It was a text message from Vivienne. Message from Vivienne. 2:14 am. "You're an imbecile. You don't know who you've messed with. If you think I'm going to leave quietly, you're very wrong. Tomorrow the whole country will know what kind of monster you are. Prepare for hell, darling. Alexander read the message without blinking. He typed a quick reply, but didn't send it. He deleted it. Silence was his best weapon for now. Hell, he muttered to himself, looking at the screen where Rosie hugged his children under the shower of milk. You don't know hell, Vivienne, but I promise you a guided tour tomorrow. He turned off the monitors. The house was silent, but it was the calm before the storm. Alexander went upstairs, checked on the twins who slept peacefully without white noise, without cursed tablets, and then stopped in front of Rosie's door. He listened for a moment. Nothing. He hoped she was sleeping. He went to his room but left his door open. For the first time in years, he wanted to be able to hear if anyone cried in the night. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, but the day did not bring peace. It brought war. Alexander woke to the sound of his phone exploding with notifications. It was 7:00 a.m. He had 50 missed calls, 20 from journalists, 10 from business partners, 5 from his mother, who lived in the Cotswolds, and 15 from Mr. Finch. He jumped up, his heart pounding. Something had happened, something serious. He rushed downstairs to the kitchen, stopping dead in the doorway. Rosie was there. She wore one of her old jeans and a simple white t-shirt, not the uniform. She was cooking scrambled eggs. The twins were in their high chairs laughing and banging the table with plastic spoons. The scene was domestic, peaceful, beautiful, but Rosie's face was pale, distraught. She was looking at the small kitchen television, which was on with the volume low. Rosie, Alexander began. She turned, her eyes full of tears. Sir, you have to see this. I'm so sorry. I didn't do anything. I swear. Alexander looked at the screen. It was the country's most watched morning gossip show, Wake Up with the Truth. In the center of the set, sitting on a white sofa, was Vivienne. But it wasn't the furious Vivienne of yesterday. It was a shattered Vivienne. She wore a simple black dress, no makeup, with deliberately messy hair. She held a handkerchief in her hand, wiping invisible tears. The ticker on the screen read, Exclusive, Vivienne Beaumont's Nightmare, the Billionaire and the Housekeeper. A plot of abuse. Alexander turned up the volume. And I only wanted to be a mother to those children, Vivienne said on television, her voice breaking. I loved them as my own, but he, Alexander, is a violent man. He has anger issues, and she, Vivienne paused dramatically. That woman, the employee, Rosie, she has him bewitched. The presenter, with a look of feigned indignation, asked, Are you saying there's something between Alexander and the housekeeper? Of course, Vivienne sobbed. I found them yesterday in the kitchen. They were together, very close. When I confronted them, Alexander went crazy. He hit me. He threw me out of my own house with nothing. He took my ring, my jewelry, my dignity. That woman is a manipulator. She got into my bed and turned my children against me. I'm afraid for the safety of those babies. That woman is not capable. She's a savage who came from nowhere. Alexander felt his blood boil. The audacity of the lie was stunning. Vivienne was reversing roles with Machiavellian precision. Sir, they're saying I'm your mistress, Rosie sobbed in the real kitchen, turning off the stove with trembling hands. They say I'm a home wrecker. If my mum sees this, she'll have a heart attack. No one will believe that rubbish, Alexander said, clenching his fists. At that moment, the house intercom rang insistently. Jenkins, the head of security, spoke through the speaker. Mr. Harrington, we have a problem. There are 5 television news vans outside the gate and about 20 photographers blocking the exit. They're shouting, Miss Rosie's name. They want a photo of the mistress. Rosie covered her face with her hands and slid to the floor, hiding behind the kitchen island. They're going to kill me. They're going to destroy me. I have to go, sir. I have to go out the back door before this gets worse. I don't want to ruin your life. Alexander walked over to her, grabbed her shoulders, and lifted her firmly. Look at me, he ordered. Look at me, Rosie. She looked up, terrified. You are not going anywhere. You have done nothing wrong. You are the victim here, and today the whole world will see it. But she's Vivienne Beaumont. She's famous, beautiful, rich. They believe everything she says. No one will believe me. I'm nobody. You are the woman who saved my children, Alexander said. And I am Alexander Harrington, and I have something Vivienne forgot. I have proof. The front doorbell rang. That must be Finch, Alexander said. Rosie, do you trust me? Yes, sir, I think so. Then dry those tears. Give the children their breakfast. I'm going out. You're going out? She asked, scared. Out there with the journalists? Not only am I going out. Alexander adjusted his shirt collar, even though it was wrinkled from a restless night. I'm going to give them the show they came for. Alexander walked to the main entrance. Jenkins and 2 other guards were holding the door. "Open the gate," Alexander ordered over the radio. "Sir, are you sure?" "They'll swarm you," Jenkins warned. "Open the gate and let the cameras in, all of them. Let them into the garden. I want a press conference at my door in 5 minutes." As Jenkins executed the order, stunned, Alexander took out his phone and connected to the house's audio and video system. He selected the file marked Evidence 1, Kitchen, and the file Evidence 2, Tablet. He walked out onto the portico of his mansion. The camera flashes were blinding. Journalists shouted questions like, "Hungry hyenas. Mr. Harrington, is it true you hit Vivienne? Is it true you slept with the nanny? Where is the employee? Vivienne says she fears for her life." Alexander raised a hand. His face was stone. The natural authority he exuded caused the shouting to gradually subside into a tense murmur. "Good morning," Alexander said, his voice clear without the need for a microphone. "I have heard the statements of my ex-fiancée, Vivienne Beaumont. These are serious accusations: domestic violence, adultery, child abuse." The journalists leaned in with their recorders, expecting an apology. A weak denial. "Vivienne says a picture is worth 1,000 words," Alexander continued. "I agree. That's why I'm not going to give you a speech. I'm going to give you the truth." Alexander pointed to the enormous television screen installed on the outdoor terrace, usually used for watching football matches with friends. With a tap on his phone, the black screen came to life. The silence in the garden became absolute. On the giant screen appeared the date and time. Yesterday, 10:14 a.m. The image was crisp, 4K, and with high-fidelity sound. Everyone saw Vivienne enter the kitchen. Everyone heard her screams, "You useless creature. I hate those bastards." Everyone saw her throw the hot coffee. Everyone watched with collective horror as she poured cold milk over Rosie's head while she protected the babies. Everyone heard the confession. "I want the money. I'll send them to a boarding school in Switzerland. They're in the way." The journalists were aghast. Some lowered their cameras, shocked. Others filmed with more frenzy, knowing they had the scoop of the year. The video ended. Alexander didn't stop it. He then played the audio from the tablet. Vivienne's voice, distorted by hatred, filled the garden. "Be quiet. No one loves you. Mummy died because of you." Alexander turned off the screen, turned to the stunned crowd. "That is the woman who is crying on national television right now," Alexander said in an icy voice. "The woman who accuses Rosie Davies, a 20-year-old, earning minimum wage, of being the villain. Rosie Davies endured burns, humiliations, and blows to protect my children from that monster. Those bruises Vivienne claims to have on her arms, did she inflict them herself, or did she get them while struggling when she tried to assault an 8-month-old baby?" Alexander looked directly into the camera of the news van that was broadcasting live. "Vivienne, if you're watching, my barristers are already at the Crown Prosecution Service. You have 1 hour to surrender before they issue the arrest warrant for aggravated child abuse, physical assault, defamation, and emotional distress. The show is over." He turned on his heel and walked towards his house door. Mr. Harrington, where is Rosie? We want to talk to the heroine." The journalists now shouted, changing the narrative in a second. Alexander stopped at the threshold, turned, and said one last sentence. "Rosie is having breakfast with my family, and I ask you to respect her privacy, or the next lawsuit will be against you." He entered and closed the heavy door, leaving the chaos outside. The silence of the hall greeted him. Rosie was there, standing at the foot of the stairs, holding the twins. She had seen and heard everything from the side window. She was crying, but this time it wasn't from fear. Alexander approached her. He felt exhausted, as if he had run a marathon, but seeing her safe, he felt an unknown peace. "You did it," she asked. "You showed that to everyone?" "To everyone," Alexander confirmed. "No one will believe her anymore, Rosie. Never again. Your name is clear." Rosie lowered her gaze, unable to process that such a powerful man had exposed his own private life just to defend her. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one has ever done anything like this for me." Alexander reached out and with a gentle gesture wiped a tear from her cheek. "Get used to it," he said, "because while you're in this house, no one will touch you." At that instant, the house phone rang. Alexander answered on the wall speaker. "It was Mr. Finch." "Alexander, I saw the broadcast. Brutal, but effective. The CPS has just seen the video. They issued the order. The police are on their way to the TV studio to arrest Vivienne live." Alexander looked at Rosie and his children. "Let them take her," he said. "Let them take her far away." How will Vivienne react when she sees the police enter the TV set? What will happen when Alexander's mother arrives from the Cotswolds after seeing the scandal? Subscribe to see the villain's downfall in the next part. The Wake Up with the Truth television studio was in a tense, vibrating silence. Minutes earlier, Vivienne Beaumont had the audience in the palm of her hand, crying perfect tears and painting Alexander as a monster. But something had changed in the air. The cameramen murmured among themselves, looking at their phones. The presenter, Claudia, nervously touched her earpiece, listening to urgent instructions from the control booth. Her usually composed face visibly paled. "Vivienne," Claudia said, cutting off her guest's rehearsed sob. We have some breaking news." Vivienne wiped a non-existent tear with her silk handkerchief. "Is it him? Is he trying to threaten me again? I told you he's a dangerous man." "It's not a threat, Vivienne," the presenter said, her tone of voice changing from empathy to professional coolness. "It's a video. Mr. Alexander Harrington has just made public a security recording from his kitchen." Vivienne's victim's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "A video? Surely it's edited. He has a lot of money. He can pay experts to manipulate images." "Production, put it on screen," Claudia ordered, ignoring the excuse. On the giant screen behind Vivienne, the crisp image of the kitchen appeared. The entire country watched in high definition as Vivienne grabbed Rosie's arm. They heard the sound of the mug hitting the floor. They saw the milk pouring over the housekeepers and the babies' heads. But the worst was the audio. Vivienne's voice, shrill and cruel, filled the studio. "I don't give a damn if they drown." Vivienne jumped to her feet, knocking off her lapel microphone. "That's a lie. It's artificial intelligence. It's a setup," she screamed, looking at the cameras with wide eyes. "Take that off. You're forbidden to show that. I'll sue you." "Please sit down," Claudia said, stepping back from the woman's aggressiveness. "The video has been verified by the authorities in real time, and it's not the only thing. We have audio from a tablet hidden in the cart." "Be quiet," Vivienne shrieked, losing all composure. Her high society mask had disintegrated, revealing the deranged woman she truly was. "You're all idiots, all of you. I'm the victim. That servant provoked me. She wanted to steal my fiancé." At that moment, the double doors of the studio burst open with a metallic clang. It wasn't commercials, it wasn't a producer. 4 uniformed police officers entered the set, walking directly towards the white sofa under the spotlights. The head of the operation, a stern-faced man, held a paper in his hand. "Vivienne Beaumont," the officer announced, his voice reverberating over her screams. "You are under arrest." "What?" Vivienne stumbled backward until she hit the giant screen where her own malice was repeating in a loop. "You can't touch me. Do you know who my father is? I'm a Beaumont. You have an arrest warrant for aggravated domestic violence, child abuse, attempted extortion, and making false statements," the officer recited, pulling out a pair of metal handcuffs that gleamed under the studio lights. "Put your hands behind your back. Now." "No, Alexander," she screamed at the camera as if he could hear her. "Alexander, tell them to stop. It was a joke. I was just nervous about the wedding. I love you, my darling. Forgive me." The officer didn't wait any longer. He grabbed her arm, the same arm with which she had harmed Rosie, and spun her with professional force. The click-clack sound of the handcuffs closing was the most satisfying sound the national audience had heard in years. "You're hurting me, brute!" Vivienne began to kick as 2 officers dragged her towards the exit. Her designer heels slipped on the polished studio floor. "Let go of me! I'll destroy you all! I'm rich! I have rights!" The camera followed the scene until Vivienne disappeared down the hallway, screaming obscenities that had to be censored by the production. In Harrington Manor, Alexander pressed the red button on the remote control. The living room screen went black, silencing the last screams of his ex-fiancée. The silence that followed was absolute, but this time it was a silence of peace, of cleanliness. Alexander turned on the sofa. Beside him, Rosie sat with her hands covering her mouth, trembling, not from fear, but from the emotional release of seeing that for the first time in her life, money had not bought impunity. "They took her away," Rosie whispered incredulously. "They really took her away." "I told you no one would touch you again," Alexander said softly. "And I told you she would pay." Rosie lowered her hands. Her eyes shone with new tears. "Sir," she choked out his name in the end. "She said she loved you." "She loves no one, Rosie. Not me, not the children, not even herself. She only loves power, and she just lost everything." Alexander stood up and poured himself a glass of water. His hands trembled slightly. He had maintained the facade of an ice-cold man in front of the press and his employees. But inside, he was shattered. He had been about to marry that woman. He had allowed that woman to sleep under his roof. Guilt was an acid burning his stomach. "Sir," Rosie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She had stood up and was standing next to him. "Thank you," she said. It was a simple word, but laden with infinite weight. "You saved my life today. Not just my job, my life. If she had won, I don't know what I would have done." Alexander looked at her. He saw the young woman in her simple clothes and her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, who had shown more courage than all the businessmen he knew. "No, Rosie." Alexander shook his head, and without thinking, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved mine. You saved my children. I just did what any decent father should have done a long time ago." Suddenly, a cry was heard from the first floor. The twins had woken from their nap. The sound that once caused terror in the house for fear of Vivian's reaction now sounded simply like what it was. Life. Babies calling for their parents. "I'll go," Rosie said instinctively, taking a step towards the stairs. "No," Alexander stopped her. "Let's both go." They went up the stairs together, not as employer and servant, but as a team, as a strange, broken, and mended family beginning to heal. That night, for the first time in months, Harrington Manor did not feel like a cold museum. It felt like a home. Alexander ordered pizza, something Vivienne had forbidden due to calories and the smell of grease, and they ate on the drawing room rug, with the babies crawling among cardboard boxes and toys. Rosie laughed when Matthew got tomato sauce on his nose, and Alexander found himself laughing with her. A deep, rusty laugh he hadn't used in years. It seemed like the happy ending. It seemed the storm had passed, and the sun was finally shining, but Alexander had forgotten a detail, an important detail. The news of Vivienne's arrest had not only been seen in the UK, it had been broadcast internationally and on a country estate outside London. An elegant 5-year-old woman had watched the images with a glass of wine in her hand and an expression of icy fury on her face. Lady Eleanor Harrington, Alexander's mother, was not concerned about her grandchildren's well-being. She was concerned about the family name, and for her, the scandal was an unforgivable sin. Alexander thought the war was over. He didn't know the true matriarch was packing her bags. 3 days passed, 3 days of unreal and wonderful calm. The atmosphere in the house had changed radically. The heavy curtains Vivienne kept closed to protect the furniture from the sun were now wide open, letting light flood the rooms. The pretentious classical music had been replaced by children's songs and sometimes by the low-volume radio Rosie liked to listen to while cooking. Yes, Rosie was still cooking, even though Alexander had told her it wasn't necessary. "I can't sit around all day, sir," she had told him with a shy smile. "I go mad. Besides, you need to eat real food, not those gourmet dishes that are just for show." So Alexander, the billionaire who used to eat in the city's most exclusive restaurants, now found himself coming home early from the office to have chicken casserole with mashed potatoes, handmade by Rosie, and it tasted like heaven. Rosie had also changed. She no longer wore the uniform. Alexander had ordered a selection of comfortable and beautiful clothes from a local boutique. At first, she refused, saying it was too much expense, but he insisted, saying it was part of the new security protocol. Now, she wore soft cotton blouses, comfortable trousers and trainers. She looked younger, more alive, and Alexander found himself watching her more than he should when she played with the children in the garden. That Thursday afternoon, the scene in the drawing room was perfect. Alexander was sitting on the floor, trying to build a block castle with Liam, while Rosie read a story to Matthew on the sofa. Then the prince defeated the dragon, Rosie read in a sweet voice, making exaggerated gestures that made the baby laugh. Alexander smiled watching them. He thought about how ironic it was. He had sought a perfect wife in high society circles, looking for education, lineage, and beauty, and had found coldness and cruelty. And here, in the woman who cleaned his floors, he had found everything that truly mattered: warmth, loyalty, and an instinctive maternal love that couldn't be learned in any Swiss boarding school. "Sir," Rosie said, noticing his fixed gaze, blushing slightly. "Call me Alexander," he corrected her for the umpteenth time. "It's difficult, Alexander." She tried the name. It sounded sweet on her lips. "I wanted to ask you, do you think the children should start swimming lessons? I read it's good for their motor development." And the sound of the main doorbell cut off the conversation. It was a long, insistent, authoritative chime. It wasn't the postman. It wasn't a social call. It sounded like a demand. Alexander frowned. Jenkins hadn't informed him of any visit. He stood up, dusting off his trousers. "I'll see who it is. Stay here." He walked towards the vestibule. Before he could reach the door, it opened. Jenkins was there, looking panicked, trying to stop someone, but failing miserably. "Lady Eleanor, please wait. Mr. Harrington didn't know." A woman entered like a hurricane of Chanel and disdain. Lady Eleanor Harrington, tall, slender, with grey hair styled in a perfect cut and a tailored suit that cost more than Jenkins's car. Her eyes were identical to Alexander's, but hard as steel. "Get out of my way," Eleanor snapped at the guard, and then her gaze fixed on her son. "Alexander, mother." Alexander froze for a moment. He hadn't seen her in 2 years. She hated traveling to the UK. She said it was too chaotic. "What are you doing here? Why didn't you warn us?" "Warn?" Eleanor let out a dry laugh, placing her crocodile skin handbag on an antique table with a sharp thud. "For what? So you could hide your mess?" "I had to learn from the Spanish news that my son, the heir to the Harringtons, has turned his life into a cheap tabloid drama." Eleanor walked into the drawing room, ignoring Alexander's attempt at a hug. Her heels echoed on the marble like gunshots. She entered the drawing room and stopped dead. Her gaze scanned the room with laser precision. She saw the toys strewn on the floor, unacceptable clutter. She saw the pizza box from the night before that hadn't been thrown out yet, an act of vulgarity, and finally she saw Rosie. Rosie had stood up quickly, hugging Matthew against her chest like a shield. She felt small, insignificant, before the imposing presence of this woman, who looked at her as if she were a grease stain on a white shirt. "Well," Eleanor said, drawing out the words. "So this is the famous heroine. Mother, please." Alexander entered behind her, tensely positioning himself between the two women. "Don't please me, Alexander." Eleanor cut in, continuing to scrutinize Rosie from head to toe with absolute contempt. "This is why you cancelled your wedding to a Beaumont? For this little maid? Don't speak to her like that." Alexander's voice boomed in the room, surprising even his mother. "This is Rosie, and she saved your grandchildren from being mistreated while you were comfortable in the Cotswolds. Don't be naive." Eleanor turned to him, furious. Vivienne was a difficult woman, yes, perhaps she had character. But mistreatment? Please, it was surely all a trap by this little woman. She pointed an accusing finger at Rosie. "Look at her. It's obvious what happened." She saw a rich, lonely man. She saw an opportunity and provoked the fiancé to record her and play the victim. "It's the oldest trick in the book, Alexander. And you fell for it hook, line, and sinker." Rosie felt tears burning her eyes. Again, another rich woman judging her without knowing her. Again being the villain in someone else's story. "Madam, I didn't. I was only looking after the children," she whispered. "Don't address me, you little wretch," Eleanor barked. "You're an employee. Your job is to clean and be quiet. And from what I see," she looked at Rosie's street clothes, "you've taken a lot of liberties. You already feel like the lady of the house. Are you trying on the rings already? Enough." Alexander grabbed his mother's arm, forcing her to look at him. "In this house, we don't speak to Rosie like that. She lives here. She's part of the family. And if you can't respect her, then you can turn right around and go back to the airport." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor looked at her son's hand on her arm. Then she looked into his defiant eyes. Never, in 35 years, had Alexander dared to throw her out. "Are you throwing me out?" Eleanor asked in a dangerous whisper. "Your mother? For her? I am asking for respect," Alexander said, letting go of her. "Vivienne is in prison because she tried to destroy my children. Rosie saved them. If you have a problem with that, the problem is yours, not ours." Eleanor smoothed the sleeve of her suit. Her face became an inscrutable mask. She was an expert chess player and knew that a frontal attack hadn't worked. She needed another strategy. She smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "All right, Alexander, you're right. I'm upset from the journey and the scandal." She looked at Rosie again, this time with a false gentleness that was even more terrifying than her screams. "My apologies, child. I'm a protective mother. I only want the best for my son." Rosie didn't trust her but nodded slightly. "I understand, ma'am." "Good," Eleanor said, walking to the sofa and sitting down as if on a throne. "I'll stay for a while. I want to get to know my grandchildren, and I want to see with my own eyes if this situation is as idyllic as my son claims." Alexander knew his mother was lying. He knew she was staying to investigate, to find flaws, to subtly destroy Rosie day by day until she herself decided to leave. It was a declaration of Cold War. Jenkins. Alexander called without taking his eyes off his mother. "Take my mother's luggage to the guest bedroom in the East Wing." "The East Wing?" Eleanor asked, arching an eyebrow. "Why so far? The main guest bedroom is right here, next to yours." "That room is occupied," Alexander said firmly. "Oh, really? By whom?" "By Rosie," Alexander replied. Eleanor's face contorted into a grimace of pure disgust. "You have the servant sleeping on the noble floor next to your master's suite?" She laughed a cruel laugh. "Alexander, be careful. People will think you're not just paying her to look after children." "Let them think what they want," he said. "Rosie, please take the children to the garden for a moment. I need to speak to my mother alone about the rules of this house." Rosie nodded, grateful for the escape route. She took Liam and Matthew and almost ran towards the garden door. When the glass door closed, Eleanor dropped her smile. "That girl is a danger, Alexander. She's a textbook gold digger, and I won't leave here until you realize it and get her out of our lives." "Then prepare for a very long stay, Mother," Alexander replied. "Because she's not going anywhere." Eleanor crossed her legs and took out a silver cigarette case. "We'll see, son, we'll see. Oil and water don't mix. And that girl is pond water. You're the finest olive oil. Sooner or later, nature will put everything in its place. What will Lady Eleanor plan to humiliate Rosie and make her quit? Will Rosie be able to withstand the pressure of a mother-in-law who hates her because of her social class? Subscribe to see the psychological warfare in the next part. There, I knew it. Lady Eleanor's cry of triumph echoed in the guest bedroom, silencing the murmur of the party being held downstairs. The matriarch held aloft, with gloved fingers, an antique emerald ring. The jewel shone under the lamp's light with an accusing green glow, but the ring was not in her jewelry box or her handbag. Eleanor had just theatrically pulled it from under Rosie's pillow. Rosie, standing by the door in a wine-colored cocktail dress Alexander had given her just hours earlier, felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her face lost all color. "No," she whispered, her voice choked. "I didn't. I would never." "Be quiet, thief." Eleanor turned to Alexander, who stood in the hallway with an impassive face. "Do you see, son? Do you see it now? I told you. They call them sly minxes. She gains your trust, gets into your bed, and meanwhile, she robs your house blind. My Colombian emerald has been in the family for 3 generations, and this servant had it hidden like a rat." Behind Alexander, a couple of high society guests Eleanor had insisted on inviting for a welcome dinner whispered scandalized. The trap had been perfect. Eleanor had organized the dinner not to celebrate, but to expose. She had forced Rosie to sit at the table. She had humiliated her with questions about French literature and etiquette that she knew the girl couldn't answer. And finally, she had staged the grand finale, the theft. "Call the police, Alexander," Eleanor ordered, walking towards him with the jewel in her hand. This time there are no cameras to save her. The ring was in her bed, in her room. It's clear evidence. I want her dragged out of here in handcuffs, just like the other one. It's poetic justice. Rosie looked at Alexander. Her eyes were filled with absolute panic, but she didn't plead. She didn't shout that she was innocent. She simply looked at him with that resignation of someone who has been beaten by life too many times. If he believed his mother, if he thought for a second that she was capable of stealing, then nothing they had lived through mattered. "Alexander," Rosie said in a thin voice, "I don't know how that got there. I swear on my mum's life." "Stop swearing on your sick mother, you wretch!" Eleanor snapped with disgust. "You surely stole this to pay for her medicines? It's pathetic." Alexander took a step forward, entering the room. His presence filled the space, charged with an electric and dangerous energy. He didn't look at Rosie. He looked fixedly at his mother. "You found it under the pillow?" Alexander asked, with a casual, almost bored tone of voice. "Yes," Eleanor pointed to the rumpled bed. "I lifted the pillow, and there it was, undeniable proof." Alexander nodded slowly. He put his hands in his suit, trouser pockets. "That's curious." "What's curious?" Eleanor asked impatiently. "That your lover is a thief isn't curious. It's a crime." "It's curious," Alexander repeated, approaching the bed. "Because Rosie hasn't been in this room since 2:00 p.m. She's been with me in the study going over the children's schedules. Then we were in the garden, playing with Liam and Matthew, and after that, she got ready in the downstairs guest bathroom, because you insisted." Eleanor's smile wavered slightly. "Well, she could have put it there this morning." "Impossible," Alexander said. "Because you were wearing that ring at 5. 00 p.m. I saw it when you came down to criticize the floral arrangements. Eleanor stiffened. Perhaps it fell off, and she found it and hid it. Don't try to defend the indefensible, Alexander. The jewel is in her bed. Alexander let out a brief, dry, humorless laugh. He pulled out his phone from his pocket. Mother, do you remember why Vivienne is in prison? For the kitchen video. Eleanor replied, frowning. And what does that have to do with anything? It has to do, Alexander said, unlocking the screen and projecting the image towards her, with the fact that after Vivienne, I didn't just put cameras in the kitchen. I put cameras in the hallways and in the guest bedrooms. Lady Eleanor's face transformed. The perfect makeup seemed to crack under the weight of terror. You have cameras here? For Rosie's safety, Alexander clarified in an icy voice. I knew you'd come for her. I know you, Mother. You're predictable. Alexander turned the phone so that Eleanor and the curious guests could see the screen. The video showed the room just 20 minutes ago. It showed the empty room. Then the door opened. Lady Eleanor entered, glancing furtively behind her. The elegant matriarch was seen taking the ring from her own décolletage. She was seen lifting Rosie's pillow. She was seen planting the jewel. And she was seen smiling at the mirror before leaving to start her scandal. The silence in the room was deadly. The high society guests recoiled, looking at Eleanor with a mixture of horror and second-hand embarrassment. Being a classist was acceptable in their circle. Being a liar and a cheat caught on video was not. Rosie let out the breath she was holding and brought a hand to her chest, breaking into silent tears of relief. Alexander, Eleanor stammered, backing up until she hit the dressing table. That's manipulation. It's a misleading angle. I was just checking if the bed was properly made. It's over, Alexander said. He put away his phone, and his voice dropped an octave, becoming fearsome. You have 1 hour. What? Eleanor blinked, not understanding. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and get out of my house, Alexander sentenced. Jenkins will take you to the airport. The private jet is ready to depart back to the Cotswolds tonight. You can't kick me out, Eleanor shrieked, losing her composure. I'm your mother. I did this for you to open your eyes. That woman isn't for us, Alexander. You'll ruin the Harrington name by mixing your blood with that of a servant. Alexander walked over to Rosie, put an arm around her shoulders, and firmly pulled her close, protecting her. The Harrington name was stained by cruelty and arrogance, he said. Rosie is the only clean and decent thing that has entered this family in years. And if I have to choose between the family name and the woman who loves my children, the family name can go to hell. He turned to the guests who watched the scene open-mouthed. The dinner is over. Please leave. Jenkins will escort you out along with my mother. Alexander, you'll regret this, Eleanor cried as Jenkins, with a serious face, entered the room to carry out the order. When she's taken everything from you, don't come crying to me. Get her out of here, Jenkins, Alexander ordered, turning his back. They heard Eleanor's shouts fading down the hallway, a mixture of insults and threats that vanished downstairs. Alexander didn't move until the front door closed with a heavy thud, sealing his mother's fate out of their lives. The room fell silent. Only Rosie's agitated breathing could be heard. She gently pulled away from Alexander's embrace, feeling unworthy of being so close. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry for causing this with your mother. She's your mother, Mr. Harrington. You shouldn't have thrown her out for me. Alexander looked at her incredulously. You're still apologizing? He asked, shaking his head. She framed you for a crime, Rosie. She humiliated you, and you're worried about my relationship with her? He walked over to her and took her hands. They were cold and trembling. Look at me, he asked. She looked up. Her dark eyes, outlined by tears, were the most honest he had ever seen. No one will ever harm you again in this house. I promised you. And I keep my promises. But what will happen now? She asked. Lady Eleanor is gone. Vivienne is gone. You need someone of your own standing. I don't know about wines, or art, or how to talk to those rich people. I only know how to care for Liam and Matthew. Alexander smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. And who said I want you to know about wines? The next morning dawned differently. The air in the mansion was lighter, as if the stone walls had shed centuries of weight. There were no shouts, no judgments, no tension. Rosie went down to the kitchen early, as was her custom. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse. Although Alexander had told her 1,000 times that she didn't have to work, her hands needed to be busy. She made coffee, cut fresh fruit, and began to warm the bottles. When she turned, Alexander was there. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore linen trousers and a rolled-up shirt. He was barefoot, looking human, approachable. "Good morning," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Good morning, sir," she said. "I mean, Alexander," she corrected herself, blushing. Alexander entered and poured himself a cup of coffee directly from the pot, without waiting for her to serve it. "I need you to come with me to the study for a moment. The children are still asleep. I saw them before coming down. We have 10 minutes. Rosie's heart fluttered. The study. That place always meant serious things. Firings, contracts, problems. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked automatically. "Quite the opposite," he said, and gestured for her to follow him. Alexander's study was an imposing room, filled with law and finance books, with a mahogany desk that looked like a fortress. But on the desk this time there were no computers or complicated legal contracts. There was a blue leather folder and a small velvet box. Alexander sat on the edge of the desk, not in his boss's chair, placing himself at the same height as Rosie. "Sit down, please." Rosie sat in the visitor's chair, wringing her hands. "Rosie, last night I was thinking a lot. After my mother left, I realized something. This situation cannot continue like this." Rosie felt a coldness in her stomach. "Here it comes," she thought. "He's going to tell me to find an apartment, that he'll give me money, but I can't live here because people talk." "I understand, Alexander. Don't worry, I can start packing today. I ask you to let me come see the children from time to time. I'm going to miss them terribly." Alexander frowned, confused. "Packing? What are you talking about?" "About leaving. You said the situation can't continue like this, and you're right. I'm the employee living in the guest bedroom. It's strange. People are speaking ill of you." Alexander laughed, a soft laugh, and shook his head. "Rosie, I didn't bring you here to fire you. I brought you here to hire you, or rather, to partner with you." He picked up the blue folder and handed it to her. "Open it." Rosie opened the folder with trembling fingers. There were legal documents with official seals. She read the title, Full Adoption and Shared Guardianship Agreement. And below, another document, Trust Fund, in the name of Rosie Mary Davies. She looked up, not understanding anything. "What is this?" "It's the future," Alexander explained in a firm voice. "These papers say 2 things. First, that I have initiated the procedures for you to legally have guardianship of Liam and Matthew in case something happens to me. You are their mother in everything but blood, and I want the law to recognize it. No one will ever be able to separate you from them, ever." Rosie's eyes filled with tears. "Me, guardian? But I'm poor, I have no education. You have more wisdom in your little finger than all the doctors I know," he cut her off. "And the second paper is a trust fund. I put a significant amount of money in your name. It's not a salary. It's yours so you can study what you want, so you can buy a house if you want, so your mother can have the best nurses in the world, so you can be free. Rosie, I want you to stay here not because you have to for money, but because you want to." Rosie closed the folder, overwhelmed. The money didn't matter to her, but the gesture of giving her power, of giving her freedom, was something no one had ever done for her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, crying openly. Alexander stood up, walked around the desk, and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Because you taught me that money is useless if you come home to an empty house. Because my children smile when they see you. And because..." Alexander hesitated for a second, lowering his guard completely. "Because I also smile when I see you." He opened the small velvet box that was on the table. Rosie held her breath, expecting an engagement ring. But it wasn't that. It was a key, an old wrought iron key. "It's not a ring," Alexander said, seeing her expression. "I'm not going to propose marriage today. That would be taking advantage of the situation, and you deserve a real courtship. You deserve dates. You deserve flowers. You deserve to be fallen in love with slowly, not bought." Rosie smiled through her tears. "Then what is it?" "It's the master key to the house," Alexander said, placing it in her palm and closing her fingers over the cold metal. "It opens all the doors, the entrance, the study, the safe, the wine cellar. Until now, you had the service key. You entered through the back. That's over. With this key, you enter through the grand door. You are as much the mistress of this house as I am. You run things here. If you don't like a painting, we'll remove it. If you want to change the furniture, we'll change it. This is your house, Rosie." Rosie looked at the key. It was heavy. It meant responsibility, but it also meant belonging. She was no longer a guest, no longer a servant. She was the lady of the house. "What if I make mistakes?" she asked fearfully. "What if I don't know how to be a rich lady?" I don't want a rich lady, Alexander said, standing up and helping her up with him. I want Rosie. I want the woman who hums a lullaby while cooking. I want the woman who faces lionesses for my children. Be yourself. That's more than enough. At that moment, a noise in the hallway interrupted them. It was babbling. Alexander and Rosie went into the hallway. The twins, Liam and Matthew, had woken up. They had managed to get out of their room, which now had an open, low safety gate, and were crawling down the hallway at full speed, laughing. Seeing Alexander and Rosie together, the babies shouted with joy. "Daddy," Matthew babbled for the first time with clarity. "Mummy," Liam said, looking at Rosie and extending his arms. Time stopped. Rosie froze. He said, "Mummy?" Alexander smiled, his eyes bright. "I think the children voted before us." Rosie ran to them and knelt on the floor, hugging the two little whirlwinds. Alexander joined the embrace on the carpeted hallway floor. There, on the carpeted floor, with the master key in Rosie's pocket and the babies saying their first words, Alexander knew he had made the best decision of his life. He had lost a trophy fiancée, but he had gained a real life. "So," Alexander said, looking at Rosie over his children's heads, "do you accept the position, co-captain of this ship?" Rosie wiped her tears, kissed Liam's forehead, and looked at Alexander with new confidence. "I accept, but on one condition." "Which is?" he asked, ready to give her the world. "That you cook tonight. I'm exhausted from all the emotion." Alexander let out a hearty laugh. "Deal, but I warn you, I only know how to make sandwiches." "That's enough," she said, smiling. "As long as we're together, with bread and water, I'm happy." Peace had arrived, but the love story had only just begun. What will be the first real date between the billionaire and the former employee? What will happen when society sees them together for the first time? Subscribe for the thrilling finale. 1 year, 365 days had passed since that fateful morning in the kitchen, where a spilled glass of milk changed the destiny of 4 lives. Harrington Manor's garden was unrecognizable, not due to remodeling, but due to the energy. Where before there had been silence and trees pruned with military rigidity, now there were laughs, white balloons, and rows of golden chairs occupied by the city's most important people. But in the front row, in the place of honor usually reserved for royalty or foreign dignitaries, sat an elderly woman with wrinkled hands resting on a cane. It was Rosie's mother, her skin no longer gray from illness. Thanks to the best doctors Alexander's money could afford, her diabetes was controlled, and her eyes sparkled with a mixture of disbelief and pride. "Are you nervous?" Alexander asked. They stood behind a large floral arch of white roses, hidden from the guests' view. Alexander wore a perfectly cut black tuxedo, but his hands, usually firm for signing multi-million-pound contracts, trembled slightly. Rosie looked at herself. The full-length mirror placed there reflected an image she found hard to recognize. There was no blue uniform, no yellow rubber gloves. She wore a simple, elegant French lace wedding dress that fitted her figure delicately. In her hair, a discreet diamond tiara sparkled under the afternoon sun. "I'm not nervous about the wedding," she confessed, adjusting his tie with familiarity. "I'm nervous about the heels. I still feel more comfortable in trainers." Alexander smiled and kissed her forehead. "If you get tired, I'll carry you. I'll carry you to the altar, and I'll carry you for the rest of my life if need be." The music began to play. It wasn't the traditional wedding march. It was a soft, instrumental version of a gentle lullaby that had united their hearts in the kitchen. "It's time," Alexander said, offering her his arm, but Rosie shook her head. "I won't walk in alone. You have to wait for me there with them." Alexander nodded, understanding the symbolism. He went out first, walking towards the improvised altar under the old oak tree. The crowd held its breath. Alexander Harrington, the Golden Bachelor, looked happier than ever. And then the true protagonists made their entrance. Liam and Matthew, now almost 2-year-old toddlers, stumbled down the central aisle, dressed in miniature suits, identical to their fathers. They carried a cushion with the rings. They weren't crying, they weren't scared. They walked laughing, waving at people, safe and loved. When they reached Alexander, he knelt down and hugged them. "Good job, my lads," he whispered. Then everyone stood up. Rosie appeared. The silence was absolute. There were no murmurs of criticism about her humble past. The dignity with which she walked, the light she emanated, quelled any prejudice. She didn't look like a former housekeeper. She looked like a queen who had conquered her kingdom through kindness. Upon reaching the altar, Alexander took her hand. The celebrant began the ceremony. But when it was time for the vows, Alexander asked to speak, took the microphone, and looked at the hundreds of guests, but then fixed his eyes on her. "Rosie," he began, his voice broken with emotion. "A year ago, I was the poorest man in the world. I had full bank accounts, but an empty house. I had a magazine Fiancée, but my children lived in terror. I was blind." Alexander paused, squeezing her hand. "You didn't come into my life to clean my house. You came to clean my soul. You endured cold, humiliation, and physical pain to protect 2 babies who were not your own. You stood before a monster with no weapon but your love. That day, in that kitchen, amidst spilled milk and broken glass, you taught me what true nobility is." Rosie openly wept, and half the guests did too. "I promise," Alexander continued, "not only to love and respect you, I promise you will never have to be strong alone again. I promise my hands will serve to heal your wounds, not to cause them. And I promise that even though you now wear silks and diamonds, I will never forget the girl in the blue uniform who saved my family. I love you, Rosie. You are my heroine. Rosie took the microphone. Her hand trembled, but her voice came out clear. "I don't have pretty words, Alexander. I just know that love isn't what is said, it's what is done. And you gave me back my dignity. You healed my mother. You loved my scars. I promise to take care of you, Liam and Matthew, with every beat of my heart until God grants me life, because you are my true treasure." "You may kiss the bride," the celebrant said with a smile. The kiss was soft, tender, sealing not only a marriage but the final victory of good over evil. Applause erupted like thunder. Liam and Matthew clung to their parents' legs, completing the perfect picture. Meanwhile, miles away, in a very different place, reality was otherwise. The high-security women's prison was a grey, cold, and hopeless place. In the common dining hall, the clatter of metal plates and the shouts of the inmates created an unbearable cacophony. In a corner, a woman in a worn, dirty orange prisoner's uniform was on her knees. Vivienne Beaumont, the woman who used to spend thousands of pounds on weekly manicures, now had cracked hands and broken nails. She held a stiff bristled brush and a bucket of grey soapy water. "Move it, Beaumont," a burly guard shouted, banging her baton against the table. "That floor has to shine. You missed that spot there." Coming, Vivienne muttered, her voice hoarse. She had lost her haughtiness, she had lost her sparkle. The prison and the inmates, who knew what she had done to babies, had taken it upon themselves to educate her. Vivienne scrubbed the floor with force, feeling the burning in her muscles. Then she looked up at the small television hanging on the cafeteria wall, protected by a metal cage. The entertainment news was on. The headline glowed in golden letters. "The wedding of the year. Billionaire Alexander Harrington marries Rosie Davies, the woman who conquered his heart." Vivienne stopped scrubbing. She froze. On the screen, she saw Alexander kissing Rosie. She saw the lace dress. She saw the twins healthy and happy. She saw the mansion she once believed was hers, and she saw in the front row the empty space where she should have been. "That should be me," she whispered, a tear of rage and regret falling into the dirty water of the bucket. "All of that was mine." "What did you say, princess?" the guard barked. "Nothing." Vivienne lowered her head, returning to her reality. "Then keep scrubbing, and polish my boots when you're done. Here, the only servant is you." Poetic justice closed over her like a concrete slab. Vivienne, the woman who humiliated an employee, would now spend the rest of her youth cleaning the dirt of others, trapped in the nightmare she herself created. Back in the mansion, the party was over, but the magic was not. Alexander and Rosie sat on their bedroom balcony, gazing at the stars. The children slept peacefully in the room next door, this time with the door open. No tablets, no fears. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, stroking his wife's hand, where a simple gold band now gleamed, just as she had requested. Rosie sighed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm thinking that life is strange. Sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom for someone to give you a hand and lift you to heaven. You never hit rock bottom." "Rosie," he said, kissing her hair. "You were always above all of us. I just took too long to look up." Rosie smiled and looked towards the dark garden. In the distance, she saw the small basement window of the staff quarters where she used to cry and pray. The light was off. That room no longer existed. Now it was a toy storage room. "Alexander?" "Yes?" "Can I make you breakfast tomorrow?" Alexander laughed. "Rosie, you're the owner of half my fortune. You have chefs at your disposal. Do you really want to cook?" Yes, she said firmly, because love tastes better when it's made with your own hands, and besides, no one makes scrambled eggs like I do. Alexander hugged her tightly, feeling that finally, after so many years of coldness and loneliness, he had come home. Deal, Mrs. Harrington, deal. And so, under the moonlight illuminating the mansion, which ceased to be a house to become a home, the story of the housekeeper and the billionaire came to an end, or rather, to the beginning of their true life, the end. Thank you for following this story of justice, love, and redemption. If you were moved by Vivienne's downfall and Rosie's happiness, share this story and subscribe for more heartfelt tales.